Leave me.
Part of my 40 before 40 challenge, I forget which number it was, but it was put 100 on black. So what did it come up on?
Red.
Red, baby.
Wesley Snipes told us to always bet on black. He lied.
He lied. You know, it was so funny because it was like the middle of the afternoon. So the casino was fairly empty. So it's just filled with like, you know, the desperate people who just sit there.
Wait, the casino was barely empty? Like it was really full?
Sorry, I mean...
Yes.
Barely full, very empty. I mean... Yeah. So the most people who are there are like the people who have clearly been there all day, every day for as a lot part of their adult life. And we went to the one roulette table that was open, and like clearly we're like green because we have no idea what we're doing. And I walk up and go,
well, that was your mistake. You bet on green.
It's only red and black.
The only green thing on the roulette table.
She just put it straight on the table with the empty space and just went, that one.
And the dealer went, all right.
So we had gone to the cashier before asking for instructions about what to do. And they went, oh, yeah, you can just go to the table and give them the cash and then they'll trade in the chips or whatever. So I'm like, hello, I hear you just take cash and we can get the things to put on the table. And the lady's like looking at us, going, yes, you need to put the cash on the table. And I'm still kind of like holding it out. Like, here's my money. She's like, no, I can't take it from you. You have to put it on the table. Like, there we go. She hands me over the 100. I'm like,
there's a ritual. There's clearly a ritual to it. I don't know. I've never been to a casino. There's clearly a ritual, some sort of magic spell that happens in casinos.
But they do wave their hands around quite a lot. It's very fascinating to watch the actual people who.
And your money's gone.
It's gone.
They get paid really well, though.
They do. Well, because you have to it's essentially. Here's a lot of money so that you don't try to want to steal more money off of the tables.
Also, you're going to work the worst hours humans can work.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yes.
Here's my question, Eloise. If it had come up black, would you have let it ride or just taken the winnings?
No, I would have taken the winnings and gone. I would have
baby.
Woohoo! And then run away. That's exactly like that. But what happened was, so it was the lady, and there was one other guy who was sitting at the table who had multiple bets all over the table, and clearly had been there for a while before we got there. So she hands me the chips, and I'm like, thank you, 100 on black, and I just slam it down on the table, and she looks at me. We're like, okay. And the guy looks at me as well, like, what the fuck is going on here? And I just kind of go, I'm doing a thing. And we stand there, and it goes on red. I'm like, oh well, thank you, bye-bye. And we walk away. And she just kind of looked at us like, what the fuck was this?
She's probably never seen someone just walk away.
I hope I made those two people's day.
And you know she's thinking, why does it always happen on my shift?
Why me? It's 2:30 in the afternoon.
I have another 12 hours till I can go home.
Yeah. Oh god. So yes, that was fun. Well, no, it wasn't. I lost $100.
But look, I have learnt. Well, I've heard. I've never been to a casino. I have learnt that only take money you're willing to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't gamble at all. I never bet on anything. It's so funny. My mother posted a comment, like a disparaging comment. I felt like saying, this coming from the woman who spends $30 on lotto every week and never wins anything, like $12.
One day. Her time will come.
Oh, you have no, every single week she phones me up. Why wasn't it me? Why wasn't it me? I'm like, I don't know, Mum.
Because don't you have more chance getting struck by lightning on the way to buy the ticket than you do winning that ticket?
Probably.
Now that's a story. That would be a story.
That would be a story.
Did you win the lottery? No, but I did get struck by lightning.
Yeah.
No, I fell down a hole and I broke both my legs.
Better than both your arms. Am I right, Brayton?
Oh, yeah, let's not go down that
All right.
one. That rabbit hole
Every
again.
thread.
I think
Every
on that
thread.
note, maybe we should start for real.
I've been recording for the last 5 minutes.
Excellent. It can be filler at the beginning then.
You always need that filler at the beginning,
You do.
which will slowly fade up.
Excellent.
Especially to make way for the lack of my content.
Woohoo!
All
So
right.
I don't know how to start this because we still don't have a name. TBD.
I thought it was the not helpfuls.
We're
The
not helpful.
helpfuls. We're not
We're
helpful.
not
We're going with that one.
This is a not helpful podcast because we can't stay on topic.
Oh no.
We aim for an hour. We're going to be here till midnight.
Okay. Good.
And we still won't have spoken about a book.
Just kind of.
Nope. So
Right,
I guess
Do you want to describe what this is about?
I thought we needed a sultry female voice to do this, so I thought Julian could.
Well, I do declare.
Who are you guys?
So I guess my idea with this, because I'm very into reading at the moment, and I know you guys also like your reading. So I thought, why not get on and just talk about what we're reading and issues we have with books, or some reviews, or some common tropes, and discuss random things that are happening in our lives too.
Oh,
Well,
are we
I've
supposed to, like,
provided the random things in there.
All right, we'll tick that off the list.
Brayton's got the microphone, so I say he's our host. Doesn't he need to like introduce us or something? I don't know how this works.
That sounds like a good idea.
There's a ghost behind you, Eloise.
Ah,
I saw them in the window.
My husband
There's someone in the window.
No. My
There's
husband-
someone in
Eloise,
you.
turn around.
No, I know how that works. I'm not
They're
turning.
right behind you.
I'm just going to slowly back up backwards without
The
facing.
call is coming from inside the house.
Now they're right in front of you. Check your bra. Oh,
Damn it! It's gone again.
So anyway, introductions. So I'm Brayton. I decided to do this and wrote my two friends into it. There's Julian
Friends.
hi.
and Eloise.
Hi.
As you can tell, none of us have done this before.
Not once.
But we
Actually,
do
I've
listen.
been on multiple
Actually,
podcasts.
yes, Eloise.
have-
I did your one that you never did anything with.
I did one episode and then it just never went anywhere.
Oh, I
Yep,
did
and-
do one. I'm on Spotify.
How are you on Spotify?
I was a guest host for my friend's podcast.
Your friend you have other friends, and your friend has a podcast.
He does. It's an early childhood podcast, and he got me on so we could talk about the difference and similarities between early childhood and late teen in learning.
You're going to have to send
I
me a link to
sounded
that.
more knowledgeable.
I want to listen to that. You'll have to send me a link.
I've
Oh, well.
guest starred on 4 different podcasts.
Oh my god! Well, Eloise, you're the expert. So you can tell us what we're doing right and wrong.
All right. You're doing it all wrong.
Sounds good. Excellent.
Shut up.
Well, according to the computer, this is recording. So fingers crossed it stays recording.
Excellent.
Yay.
So I guess we can start off with talking about what we're currently reading, and then we can go into a little bit of a discussion about a topic that I have discussed with both of you that I wanted to bring up, which is endings of books that kind of maybe underwhelming or have maybe not ruined. Well, we could say ruined the book. But my specific gripe was the ending of this current book I was reading felt a little rushed. And that kind of made me a bit like bleh on the whole series at that point. So how does that sound to you two?
Sounds great.
All right.
I like it.
Now, cool. So Eloise, I know you'd mentioned you're doing this 40 before 40 thing.
Yes.
Because you're turning 40 next year.
Challenge. So
But
I'll have to get back to you on
You're
that.
already 40, Julian.
shut up.
I'm the baby of the group. I still got 4 more years.
That's great.
Hmm.
Let me bring up my list so I actually know what number it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I specifically wanted to ask, because I saw on your Instagram you'd actually chosen to read? I don't know if you'd chosen this specific book or just wanted to read a classic piece of literature.
So, yes, number 33 on my list is read a piece of classic literature. And I did and about it for quite a while, and I actually settled on Moby Dick. I have not yet started it because I'm actually reading Dracula as we speak. So,
I've read Dracula.
Dummy Ishmael, dummy.
I don't think that's how it starts.
So you haven't even started Moby Dick yet?
No, so I will have to get back to you on the Moby Dick one. But yes, Dracula is really good. I didn't realize how excellent it actually would be. And what I find really compelling about it is that I wish I had read it when it was new. I mean, obviously that's possible because it's over 100 years old. But like, I just keep thinking about the people who must have read it at the time and how it's so compelling with this mystery, because you had like the idea of vampires was not really a thing until Dracula became popular. And it was like they would have been reading this book going, what the hell is going on? What is this sickness? Why is it affecting these people? Why is Mina constantly Lucy, sorry. Why is Lucy constantly sleepwalking and losing all of her blood, and what's going on here? And like the mystery of it unfolding is so interesting. And I just think it really is. That's why it was such a phenomenon, and why it still is a phenomenon, because of how unlike anything else at that time it would have been when it was first published. So yeah, I'm almost done with it. And so far 4 stars. Probably goes up to 5 once I've finished.
You know why Lucy was always sleepwalking, don't you? Because
Why?
she didn't have enough enemas.
She wasn't brought to climax by her therapist.
She needs another enema, and another, and another, and another.
Is that a Dracula Dead and Loving It reference?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Right. I haven't. It's admittedly been a very long time since I last saw that film, so I didn't quite understand the reference for a second.
My question is, were vampires kind of in the folklore of... I know they were like in Eastern Europe and stuff, but in like London... Wait, Bram Stoker's English, isn't he? British? English?
Irish.
British? Irish.
Irish.
Okay, I was close.
Yeah.
Were vampires like known in that culture at that point, or just not mainstream? Because I honestly don't know.
I don't think
They weren't.
Yeah, like not as a
cultural mainstream
phenomenon as it is now.
No.
Yeah. I know Dracula
weren't.
kind of cemented it, but I didn't know how common it would have been. Like you said, Eloise, how common it would have been in the mainstream.
I think it would have been one of those
time period.
Like things that some people would have known because they were into that kind of thing, like people who were into folklore or religious people who, you know, would freak out about all of that kind of stuff. But it wouldn't be like now where you would argue everyone knows what a vampire is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't, vampires are cool and mysterious and sexy. It was actual legends and myths and Spain. And so Bram Stoker picked up on that and brought that to the pop. So it was really the first pop culture introduction to vampires, I think.
Yeah, because I've read Dracula. Have you read Dracula, Julian?
Many, many, many years ago. Not for a long time.
I listened to the audio. There's on Audible. There's a full cast recording on Audible that I listened to. So that was really good. But the thing I had to keep reminding myself of is the culture at the time, especially surrounding women, because I got the feeling that women were always like. I think it was Van Helsing was very concerned about Mina's. What's the word? Like constitution or something, and always the women were on the verge of fainting all the time. And I don't know if that was just a trope at the time or if women actually were fainting a lot more than they do nowadays.
No, I think that's a patriarchal trope, unfortunately. But funnily enough, I don't find that as much in Dracula as I've found in other stories. Like Mina is actually quite independent almost, because she essentially is Jonathan Harker's carer for a short while he's recovering from his his interactions with Dracula.
Yeah, he goes through a lot.
He does, yes. And what I find really interesting is that the whole story on the Dementor is not described in the book. So that's why we've had so many different versions of what happens on the Dementor, because it became fanfic. I really want to see that film, actually.
Yes,
that came out recently. Didn't have a chance.
Me, I'm gonna have to look up
and Renfield with Nick Cage, because that just looks bonkers.
Yeah, it is. I've
but
seen
Dracula
it. It's not bad.
Was really a story of exploring that whole open sexuality and open femininity as well. So there's not going to be as much of that power struggle between men and women in it. You've got the three vampires who live with Dracula as well, who seduce Jonathan Harker, and Lucy, who's very, very confident and strong in her sexuality and that sort of thing as well. And so the story really was very much about, it was a very modern story for its time.
It really did seem that way. Yes. So that's my current readings at the moment. Julian, what are you up to?
I am currently sort of reading two books, both very poorly. I'm currently trying to get through In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, which is really, really interesting. Do you guys know the book? Or
no? I'm assuming it's a real life thing.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's the true crime story that he wrote on the farmhouse murders in the 60s.
What's the farmhouse murders?
It was basically a family of four. These two men came and killed a family of four in their house. Their motive was they thought that this person had a lot of riches and stuff in a safe in the house, because it was a very, very wealthy farmer and very well respected in the community. And so these two men came, tied up the family and killed them all. And they didn't get their riches, obviously, and they went to jail and were executed for their crimes. And during the whole time of what that happening, Capote went down and interviewed the murderers a number of times and got their side of the story as well. So what he actually got out of it was this more human side of things that you don't often see when it comes to killers, and sort of their motives and the stories behind the two people who actually, committed the crime.
That's interesting, because we see a lot of that now when it comes to true crime, where you'll get journalists and podcasters and whoever going and getting full stories behind things. Would you say that Truman Capote kind of spearheaded that kind of journalism?
Absolutely. It was never in the populace's mind until that point. Killers were monsters up until that point, and he received a lot of negative attention for doing what he did. People thought he was just trying to write a salacious story, and if it bleeds, it leads kind of a story.
But why true crime now?
Why true crime now? I don't know why now.
Can I ask? Is the book written in a non-fiction style, or is it story being retold?
It feels much more like a novel, like you're reading a novel, because you go through the day before the murder, and you get a lot of the family talking to each other and having conversations, when obviously it's just the family members who died. And so you're like, well, he's not going to know that they had that conversation. How would he know that? So it's written a lot like a novel, but it's a true story. So it's an interesting one. Yeah.
Do the murderers ever say that they were remorseful at all? Did they? I
haven't got that far into it yet. But from my understanding, one of them didn't really, but the other one was quite remorseful and fairly a very human character, from what I understand. Yeah, he researched it with Harper Lee as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so they worked together on
To Kill a Mockingbird.
To Kill a Mockingbird, and that's where the idea came that actually Capote may have written To Kill a Mockingbird, not Harper Lee.
I've never heard that rumor.
No, I have not heard that either.
Well, they were best friends, and the character of Dill in To Kill a Mockingbird is based on Truman. And having read some of the book already, there is a very similar voice between the two stories.
And could you just make that argument that his impact on her really, I guess, inspired her style of writing, or had an influence on her style of writing?
I think they heavily influenced each other a lot. I mean, she helped him research all the details of this crime and helped him write the book, and she lent on him a lot when she was writing To Kill a Mockingbird. So
nice. All right, my turn.
Yep.
All right, I am currently reading. I'm about 200 pages into the book In the Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss.
Oh, I've been meaning to read that one.
Yes, it's the first part of the Kingkiller Chronicles. Which he is working on. The second one is, I've forgotten the name, The Wise Man's Fear. And the third one is going to be called The Doors of Stone, but he's kind of in a bit of a George R.R. Martin situation with the third one at the moment.
I was just about to say, I'm like, isn't he kind of like the George R.R. Martin of young adult literature?
Because I think the second one was released around 2000. I want to say 2012, but I also feel like it might be 2014. But we're coming up to, I think, like 12 years since the second one was released. And there have been no signs that it's going to be finished anytime soon. Which is a whole another topic on its own, which I'm not going to get into. That's a topic for the next episode. Yes. But I ummed and ahed because I kept hearing how good this book was. And I ummed and ahed about buying it for ages. Because I didn't really want to start a series if I knew that there was a good chance that we weren't going to get the concluding part of it. But I saw it for a good price, picked it up, and I literally read the first page, like the prologue, and I'm like, damn it, this is really good. And now I'm hooked into it. It's really good. Like, it's essentially, it's high fantasy, which I guess, high fantasy, what would you describe that as? It's like Lord of the Rings kind of style thing, set in a different world. There's magic, there's sword fights, there's demons, there's things like that. And yeah, it's just really good. Like, I'm only 200 pages in, so maybe something will go wrong, but it's really one of those books that takes its time to build up the story and the characters, and the framing of it is very interesting because it starts off with our main character, who I'm going to butcher the name of, but it's spelt like Kvothe, which from what I could get is pronounced similar to like Quoth or something like that, which I'm probably butchering. But the book actually starts kind of after he's done his whole adventuring and he's just running this tavern in this small town, and this chronicler ends up in town and recognizes him and is searching him out and wants him to tell his story. So the whole book is this flashback of his childhood leading up to whatever adventures he's going to have.
It's like John Wick, except in high fantasy.
Yes. And he kind of says that the story is going to take him 3 days to tell. So each book is like 1 day of him retelling these 3 parts of his life. And yeah, so far we have not gotten the third book. Which, you know, the question is whether or not authors like Patrick Rothfuss or George Martin actually owe the fans to finish the book, or whether or not that's something that's up to them. If they would just go, you know what, I don't know how to finish this, I'm not into this anymore, let's just leave it where it is. I've got 2 great books and we're going to leave it there.
It's definitely a topic for another time, but I do like Neil Gaiman's answer to that. And he basically said to people on Twitter, George R.R. Martin is not your bitch.
Yes, I did see that.
He sums it up perfectly, as Neil Gaiman does.
Were they the exact words he used?
They were the exact words.
Perfect. But yes, I'm only 200 pages into that, so I'll probably have more to report on once I get further in and get really into the meat of the story, because right now we're still kind of just meeting the characters and getting to know kind of where the story's heading. But it's really good so far, and I think even though it's not finished, I still think it'll be worthwhile reading.
Sounds good. Well, yes, like I said, I have wanted to read that book. So fingers crossed we do get a third one at some point, but if not, just enjoy the first two, I guess.
Yep, definitely. And you get your money's worth because they're not short books, they're quite long.
Yeah.
No, that's all good.
So tell us, what inspired this? What book inspired this idea, Braden?
Okay, so
you lead off.
On to the topic at hand. I just finished a few weeks ago reading, it's The Arc of the Scythe. So it's a young adult series by Neil, let me look at his name again, Neil Schusterman. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Neil Schusterman, he wrote 4 books in the series. You've got Scythe, which is the first one. You got the second one, which is Thunderhead, and the third one is The Toll. That's kind of the main trilogy. And then there's a 4th book called Gleanings, which is more like a collection of short stories he's written that are set in the same world. So I haven't read that one yet, but it's sitting on my shelf, and I'll probably read it after I'm finished Name of the Wind. But essentially, the world of the Scythe is his goal with this was to create a dystopian society that's the opposite of the dystopian societies we've seen in the past. So things like maybe the Hunger Games would be a good example, where everything's gone wrong and people are being oppressed, and there's all these kind of factions in society, and everyone's just miserable all the time unless you're the wealthiest of the wealthies. Not a reflection on today's society at all. But his idea was to create a dystopia where everything actually went right.
Like a utopia?
Kind of. I wouldn't go as far as to calling this world a utopia, because essentially what happened is in this world, it's set maybe 200-300 years in the future. And what humanity did is actually they created this artificial intelligence called the Thunderhead. And it solved all our problems. It solved disease, global warming, hunger. Like, no one went without anything. It even to the point it solved death. So what people could do is they would age, and then they get to a certain point and they would say, turn the corner, and they could reset the genetic clock back. So like, I think the limit they mentioned there was like 25. So you could go all the way to 25 and then just start aging again, and then go back again. And it's mentioned in the book, some people have done this 5, 6, 7 times. Because there's
people became immortal.
Yes, exactly. But the issue there is, of course, people are still having babies. And it's leading to an overpopulation problem. So what happened is humanity got together and decided to create a organization called the Scythes, which are separate from the Thunderhead. So the Thunderhead kind of deals with all the day-to-day running of everything. Everyone's needs are taken care of. And the Scythes are separate. They don't mesh together at all. And the Scythe's sole job is to glean people, as they call it, which is essentially kill people.
Very Blade Runner.
So essentially, different Scythes have different ways of doing it, but the one we kind of meet in the first book does it very kind of randomly. Like, he says at one point there's a, 0.5% chance that someone's going to die in a car accident at some point. So just picks a person at random that's driving, stops them, and just offs them. But it's all very ceremonial and very people just accept that you essentially have immortality. You have this perfect world, but there is a chance that at some point at one day, a Scythe's going to come knocking, and that's your number up. So
choose to not age backwards then? Could they just be like, okay, well, I'm going to live my life up to this certain point and then die naturally? But would they then still be subject to the Scythes essentially killing them?
See, that kind of thing wasn't really brought up in the books much. There is a thing that if you do, you essentially can't die, because there's this whole adrenaline thing called splattering or splatting, where essentially you jump off a building and just boom, splat. And there's these revival centers that these drones will come pick up your remains, take you to a revival center, and you're alive again in a few days.
That's horrifying.
So you literally can't die. So I think literally if you did that, they would just take you to a revival center and you'd be revived and then go back. I think the only way to die is if your body is destroyed beyond the ability to be revived in any sense. So the only ways they mention to that is through like acid or burning, if there's nothing left, or to be gleaned by a scythe. But anyway, the main kind of conflict of the trilogy really comes from this idea of the Scythes are meant to be these honorable people that maintain the balance in nature. But then it's what happens if you get a scythe that actually enjoys the process of killing and actually takes pleasure from that.
They essentially become serial killers.
Essentially, they're legal serial killers that no one can stop. It's like once you've been selected for gleaning, that's it, you're done.
So the scythes, they're like human, as like yep. They're just regular humans as well?
They're just people.
And do they also have the ability to not die and then age
yep.
backwards?
Yep, they do.
Ooh, so who sides the sides?
The sides essentially go to a point and then they self-glean. So essentially it's like a ritual kind of suicide thing. So that's the only way they can die.
Well then.
So yeah, it's really interesting. It brings up all these questions of morality and, you know, like what would this world kind of cost us? In the end, it brings up topics of religion and how that has affected things and kind of like, yeah, these really interesting ideas of death and mortality and immortality and what that means for us. But the issue I have is like the first book was good. Second book, I think I might have liked even more than the first one. Third book, we come to the end of the trilogy, and this is where some of the issues that kind of spurred this conversation on kind of comes in, because it was building towards this whole climax, and it was kind of this thing like I thought the book was going one way, and then about 3/4 of the way through it went a different way that I was like, oh, I don't know about this. And then the whole climax of the book was kind of like just in the last like 30-40 pages, and then it just kind of ended. And I just didn't feel satisfied, especially with like the main antagonist of the book. There was this whole kind of build up towards what was going to happen to them. And I thought I had an idea of, oh, it'd be really interesting how they're going to have their downfall. And then it just kind of ended in a generic, I felt unsatisfying way, because I felt it almost felt like the author had to have this kind of big explosion filled kind of ending, not to get into too many spoilers, but then it just, all that build up just kind of felt for naught at the end, if you know what I mean.
And is it really finished? Like, because you mentioned a fourth book earlier. Is that part of that story, or is it a different story?
It's as I said, it's a collection of short stories, but some of them are set like during the events of the book. Some are set before the events of the book.
Right, okay.
Some might be set after. I'm not sure. I haven't read it. Yeah, so it kind of, yeah, it just, and I, thinking back on it, it's like, okay, I feel like the book should have ended in a different way. And it just felt really rushed to me. And it kind of spoiled, like the series is still really good, and I would still recommend it if you're interested in reading it. But yeah, it just kind of left me a bit unsatisfied.
Do you think there was like any interference that the author had in terms of having enough time to finish the story that they wanted to? Was there like issues with the publisher, or like
from what I could deadline? From what I could tell, there wasn't anything like that. And the book is already like 600 and something pages long. Like it's already a pretty long book.
That's really big.
Yeah, so I don't know.
It might have been that there was like, okay, well, this is a trilogy and I got to stick to the trilogy. I've got enough to actually do a fourth book, but I just have to wrap it up. And like maybe they were sort of bound by their own rule essentially and didn't know a better way to finish it off.
Yeah, maybe. It just felt like it ended very young adult action generic ending. Whereas I think it should have gone much more of a political, maybe philosophical, moral ending.
Especially considering the themes that were already introduced throughout the book. Like, it seems like a satisfying ending should have been around, you know, whatever political statement or religious statement.
Yeah, and exactly. And the pieces for that ending were already in place, but he never kind of took that next step and acted on them. It was all there for some sort of thing, and then it never acted on them.
Do you think that was just your interpretation of what it was that you were reading? Were you perhaps reading too much into something, or was it very obvious that that's where those steps were going, and then he just didn't take them in that direction?
And look, it could absolutely be my bias on it. Like, I can't get into the author's head, and we all have those kind of, well, that's why fan fictions exist. I'm sure we all have those books and movies and things. We're like, oh, this is how I would have written it if I'd done it.
I'm writing them myself.
Yep. So I definitely can see that there's some sort of my biases coming in, and I am aware that this is a young adult series, and I am a mid-30s man reading this thing, so I can't be too harsh.
But at the same time, if there was this consistency throughout it, where you can't really say, oh, maybe he was just sort of speaking down to the young adult audience, because it doesn't sound like that was what was happening before. Like, yeah. I mean, having not read it myself, I feel like I can't really go further in terms of commenting. What do you think, Julian?
I concur.
You hadn't spoken for a while. I thought I'd throw it to you.
He's listening intently.
I am listening intently. I don't really have a lot. Again, I have no idea of the novels themselves or anything like that.
Yeah, it's hard for you guys to comment on something you haven't read, but have you guys got any other examples of books or something that you felt like the ending was not as satisfying as you would have liked, or you thought it should have gone a different direction?
I have two examples, and I think, Julian, considering you read Stephen King, we might have the same example. Have you read Secret Windows? What is it? Secret
Window, Secret Garden. It's a different one. I was thinking of a different one, but yes, I know the book, the story well.
We should probably say, if we're going to talk about certain things, spoiler alert, we might actually talk about the ending. Like, I feel like Brayton's, we won't say what the ending is, because obviously it's a fairly new book, but the books I have in mind are very old, and if you haven't read them by now, too bad.
Yeah, maybe just mention what you're going to talk about, so if anyone listening doesn't want to be spoiled.
Yes. Secret Window, Secret Garden. I felt so annoyed by that ending, because the story of that was quite good all the way through, but then the ending was, and he was a ghost all along.
Is that ending different to the movie?
Very different.
The movie is way different, which is so ironic considering the actual story was that I can't even remember the character's name, but Johnny Depp's character in the movie, who's the main protagonist of the story, he's an author. He's written a book. It's very successful, but then someone turns up at his door saying that you stole my story. That was my story. And then it comes out that, yes, he did plagiarize this story. But the reason why the guy showed up was because he changed the ending. So the ending is completely different to what the story was that he plagiarized. And then the movie does the exact same thing, which is so hilarious. The ending of the movie is completely different to the ending of the actual Stephen King book.
He's still the pseudonym or whatever come to life, but
yes.
The way
was
it
he
all
a ghost all along in the movie? I can't remember.
Alter ego, I think, would probably be the best way of putting it.
Yeah, but it was just this, it was a very good book all the way up until that last page where it was, and by the way, the guy who turned up happened to be the ghost of the real author, whereas it was very much a question of, was the protagonist just crazy with a split personality? And I just felt like that was thrown in there because Stephen King is the king of horror, and he had to put in some supernatural element where I felt like that wasn't at all necessary for that particular story.
I do feel like the story is a bit of a precursor to a much better story he wrote called The Dark Half, where his pseudonym comes to life after he kills him off. And that's a much, much better story with a much better ending.
Was it an earlier book of his? Because it's a short novella. It's not even like a full book.
No, it's in, I want to say 4 Past Midnight.
Yeah, with the Langoliers.
So it was a short novella. It was still a couple of 100 pages long, though. And it was written a couple of years before he wrote The Dark Half. So.
Okay. So that was kind of like a pass at it before he kind of revisited that.
I think so, yeah.
What was the one that you were going to suggest of Stephen King's?
Under the Dome.
Oh, that one that got turned into a TV series?
Was turned into a TV series, which everyone loved for the first 3 or 4 episodes, and then suddenly everyone went, "This is horrible."
I heard it should have been a 1-season show that got some reason turned into like 3 or 4 seasons.
I watched the first episode and said to myself, "I can't take any more of this."
The Simpsons made a better version of it.
And came out about as he was writing the novel.
Oh, I didn't know it was at the same time.
Yeah, he was actually
it was a direct reference.
No, he came up with the idea back in the 70s, but he didn't have the experience that he has now to get the book off the ground, he said. And then he said a friend asked him what he was working on, so he went through the plot of Under the Dome, and he said, "Oh, that's just like a Simpsons movie." And King's like, "Oh, come
on." Oh, no.
Basic story, if you don't know, is a small town. Suddenly a dome is lowered on top of this town, and the residents cannot get out, and they don't know who put the dome there or why the dome was put there. And again, as King likes to do, the story is not really about who put the dome there. It's really about the residents and how they react, and because it's such a small town, kind of that how these guys live behind the scenes, because now that there's no outside influence, their true colors start to come through. And it's kind of pitted to be this good guy drifter who just happened to be in town when the dome came down, and the bad guy who is very well known and very popular in town, but is of course a secret villain underneath all that. And so we see how this story really evolves and how the town begins to turn on itself and start killing each other and all these sorts of things. And you start thinking, where is this going? Where is this? This is brilliant. And it's building and building towards this great showdown between these two people. And then it turns out, in the end, spoiler alert, the dome was lowered on top of them by juvenile aliens who did it for shits and giggles. And then a propane tank of a meth lab explodes, killing most of the town. And someone goes up to the mothership to beg one of the juveniles to please release the town. So they do, and it's all over. And you're just like...
Are there...
That's aliens. I didn't realize...
That's how you end it.
Aliens being dickheads.
Was there any foreshadowing to this?
Teenagers. Nope. About 3/4 of the way through a novel, the good guys, who are now very low in numbers because the main good guy has been set up as a murderer, even though he isn't. He's been set up as that. So they escape to this farmhouse to sort of hunker down and try and come to terms and see if they can find a weakness in the dome or something. And instead they find this mysterious contraption. And when they touch it, that's suddenly revealed to them that it's aliens. And that's kind of how the story ends. And it is, we all know Stephen King's endings are hit and miss at best.
I'm pretty sure he admits he's bad at endings.
He is. And this is far and away considered to be the worst ending he has ever written.
Oh,
because really? I was going to ask whether your opinion of this ending is controversial in the fandom, or if this is
no, it's considered the greatest book he's ever written to piss off the most amount of people with its end. Because there is no foreshadowing of aliens. There's no foreshadowing of anything. It's literally a propane tank of a meth lab explodes, and so they beg one of the alien teenagers to release the dome, and they do, and that's it. End.
Wow.
Hmm.
I've heard his writing process is that he doesn't structure his stories, that he sort of starts and he just figures out where he gets to purely from start to finish. Like he doesn't actually go, okay, this is going to be the start, this is the middle, this is the end and the climax. Like he doesn't prepare any of that first. He just writes until he gets somewhere. So clearly one day it was just like, aliens! That's how I'll end it.
Well, he often writes himself into a corner because of that, I think. And I don't know if you've read The Stand, Eloise, but I know The Stand. You listen to it.
And I know
I listened to the audio.
I haven't read it, but I know the story, and I know it also has a crappy ending as well.
And there was a key character in that he killed off completely without any just fanfare or build up or anything. Just let's take this character now, he's dead. And he freely admits, people are like, why did you kill this character? You built him up most of the novel to be the next most important person in this new civilization. He was going to lead them all. And he said, yeah, I realized I'd built a book about a civilization starting and I was going nowhere. So I killed this guy to move the story on. And I'm not even sure they did stand in the end.
Wasn't there a Deus Ex Machina or something at the end?
Literally, the hand of God comes in and saves the day, yes. Yeah.
Well, it was about the devil and the Antichrist, so it's not surprising that God showed up, I suppose.
No, the best part of that book was the flu.
Yes.
Yeah, I have to say, like, the first maybe 3/4 of the book I thought were better than the ending.
And then that horrible series that they made a couple of years ago.
I think that's what Oh, no, I didn't see the one from a few years ago. I saw, like, the B-grade TV movie miniseries.
With Rob Lowe and Gary Sinise. That was outstanding.
The one.
Yeah, I have to say, I tried to watch the newest adaptation of The Stand with, like, Whoopi Goldberg and, what's his name? James Marsden. And I got 2 episodes in and just went, I have no desire to continue watching this. Because it was a good adaptation, but just how they structured it was weird. And like I think I said to you once, Julian, that the whole tension of the book is like, okay, who's going to survive this plague and who's immune and how are they going to get through this into this supposed safe. Was it the Rocky Mountains? No.
Boulder, Colorado.
Boulder?
Yeah.
Boulder? Yeah. And it's like, okay, who's going to get there and how are they going to get through this now wasteland with these roving bands of bandits and stuff like that? But by jumping around in time, it's like, okay, well, we know these characters make it there safe, so why do I now care about the journey? When, to me, the journey to that was actually like my favorite part of the book.
And that's where King shines, that journey. And that's what he says. His books, he wrote a memoir called On Writing. And he admits in the book, he doesn't care about the end. He doesn't care about the plot. All he cares about are his characters and the journey that they're going through. So I guess when that journey ends, he doesn't really know what to do with them. And it just kind of, it's like the weak Jeff orgasm. It's like, Jeff.
Yeah. But I will say if we're talking about the ending of The Stand, it's like, and spoilers, spoiler alert for the end of The Stand, but once kind of Las Vegas gets destroyed, I kind of felt like as I was listening to the book, I'm like, okay, when we're at the end now, this is the ending. And then I look at it and there's still like a few more hours to go. And a huge chunk of that last section of the book is, I think it's Stu
getting back to
Boulder.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, it almost felt like King didn't know how to end, so he just kept writing.
It did feel a bit that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a common kind of thought amongst King fandom. Like, I've to be honest, The Stand is probably the only King book I've actually read, so I'm not deep into the fandom.
It's probably the book It, not The Stand. It's probably the one that the longest book that ends successfully, I think. It's quite a decent ending, quite a sad ending in its own way.
Yeah, it's on my list.
Like the Dead Zone. I quite enjoyed the Dead Zone. I think that had a really good ending as well.
Such a bleak novel.
It was.
And Pet Sematary.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can't read or watch that one because I don't like the idea of the toddler death.
Ever since I became a father, I haven't touched that book again.
Yeah.
It's on my list. I've got a few King books on my list that I feel like I really should read at some point.
Joe Hill is a good author. He nails the endings that Stephen King can't. In fact, one of Stephen King's novels was ended by Joe Hill.
Oh, really?
Which one?
11/22/63, I believe. Joe Hill actually gave him the ending for the book.
Wow.
And is considered his best ever ending. So there you go.
That one is definitely up the top of my Stephen King to read because I keep hearing how good that book is.
But it's a very good book.
I had another example
as
well in terms of story endings. So I'm probably going to lose all of our listenership by giving this example. The Axis of Time trilogy by John Birmingham. I don't know if either of you have read that one.
I have only
heard of it, never read it though.
So essentially
it's an Australian author, isn't it?
Yeah, John. He wrote.
Yeah, I did look it up. You mentioned it.
So
that's right. Yes,
his work is very prolific. He's very niche, culty, not culty, like cult following to his work, and he does some great work. So, but I don't know. The Axis of Time trilogy is essentially it's about an alternate World War II reality. So the beginning of the series is set in 2021, and he wrote this a long time ago. I should have looked up exactly when, but it's more than a decade because I read it before I had kids. And so the beginning of the book is set in 2021. It's this great big, I think it's like the US Naval Army is doing practice stuff out in the Pacific Ocean or wherever. And there's this scientific research vessel that has some kind of new technology on board that they're about to test, and they turn it on and it essentially zaps the entire fleet back in time to sometime in World War II. So I think it's like 1939 or 1940. I can't remember exactly.
So it's this time travel that changes the timeline.
Yes, so time travel changes the timeline. So all of these people come back, and essentially the entire story is about what happens now that all of these ships kind of appear all over the world. So you've got the US, who's now got advanced technology. You've got Britain, who's got advanced technology. Hitler gets his hands on it. Russia gets their hands on it. And basically it's about trying to win the war, because what all of the future people, the time travelers, know no longer it's no longer in play, because they've altered the reality, so they can't finish World War II the way that it should have. And this goes for 3 books. And I cannot tell you that how he manages to write a time-traveling story about an alternate World War II can be so boring. It was so boring. And there were so many characters there's so many characters that you have to try and keep track of who they are and what their motivations are and how they're related to everyone. And obviously there's actual historical characters, and the story's set in the point of view of all of these characters. It's kind of like if you've read Game of Thrones, you know how each chapter is from the point of view of a different character. It's very much like that for Axis of Time. And so you've got point of view stuff from Goebbels, for example, and US Navy officers, and there's this American journalist who's one of the time travelers. And I feel like if you're going to read a book that, you didn't even read that long ago, 10 years is a long time ago to read a book, but I should still be able to tell you what the overarching story is in each of the novels. I cannot for the life of me remember anything. apart from the fact that I think from book 2, there is an overarching murder mystery. Bunch of characters from the first book who were actually great characters that you got to know are suddenly murdered. And there's like a time jump between book 1 and book 2, or it might have been book 2 and book 3. I can't remember. So there are these characters who are murdered, and then murders keep happening, and the journalist character is trying to work it out. And here's where we get back to rushed endings, because at the very end of the third book, spoiler alert, well, it's not really a spoiler alert because I can't tell you much about it because I don't remember, is that the journalist works out who the murderer is, and literally on like the last 2 pages, it's like, and the murderer is this character. And I read it and I went, who the fuck is that? I don't remember who that is. A massive reveal. Clearly, it's like this big deal. I think he was like some veteran US officer who was like highly commended war hero kind of thing. But I don't remember who he was, or why it's important, or why it's shocking, or if it was at all foreshadowed, if I could have figured it out myself. And so I found that ending incredibly frustrating because it seemed like we were building to this reveal. Yeah. It was revealed on the last page, and to me, it meant nothing. It meant absolutely nothing. And I'm very sorry for all of the John Birmingham fans out there who love that series, and I know a few of them, and they'll probably never speak to me again. But that's how I felt. I have actually since heard he is currently writing a 4th novel in that series now. So it's no longer the trilogy. It'll be a quadrilogy, I suppose. Will I read it? No, because I don't remember anything about the first 3. That the 4th one will probably make no sense to me.
Just look up the plot summary on Wikipedia.
Well, actually, I tried to before we came on board for recording, and the Wikipedia article is not very forthcoming, and I don't know if it's because no one's written anything or if it's deliberately vague like that.
No one remembered what happened.
No one remembered what happened. They went to write it and went, oh no, what happened? Oh, I can't be bothered reading it.
But see, that's kind of the crux. What you kind of said there is the crux of what I was trying to get to with this arc of the Scythe, that it's this such big build-up that it's going to be such a huge thing, and then it's just like, It's like, okay, it's like, yep, it ended and it was fine, but I just felt like it needed more. And maybe that's just me coming in with that whole thing like, oh, I could have written it better, which no, I probably couldn't have.
Well, on that note, like, how do you think, and we could probably go each in turn, how do you think these stories could have been improved? Like, how could they have been written differently for the ending to be a more satisfying ending?
Okay. So how I would have ended it?
Yeah, I guess.
All right. Well, I'm trying not to get too into spoilers here, because I do think the trilogy, I want to make it up front. I think the trilogy is really good, and I do think, like, if I was rating the whole trilogy, I would still give it like a solid 4 out of 5 for the whole thing, because I really enjoyed the journey. But yeah, I think it was going this whole, like, it was more about, like, how I felt it was going. It was more about the people kind of seeing there's this injustice in the world and rising up to overcome that without the need of this super advanced AI that had kind of taken over their lives. And it's that whole thing that if you give everyone what they want, are they going to fight back against this kind of tyranny that's coming over that they may not even realize is happening? So I wanted more of that, the people coming together and overcoming this thing, like, as humanity. I wanted humanity coming together to do this. And not to get into spoilers again, but it really became, here's our problems, let's now run away from them and deal with this with big explosions.
Do you think, though, humanity coming together and overcoming it in the end triumphant leads to its own kind of trope, though? We do see that quite a lot.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But how I was reading it is that's kind of how I felt the book was going anyway. Like this main antagonist had this philosophy around the world, and ultimately, me as a reader, I wanted him to be proven wrong because he's the antagonist. I don't like this guy. He needs to be taken down, but how that happened just was very unsatisfying to me.
Okay. Julian, what do you think? How, like the Stephen King stories we discussed, how could they have
Well, with Under the Dome, it should have been adult aliens, not juvenile. That would have fixed everything.
I just don't think it should have been aliens. Like,
look, honestly, I mean, you could have ended the novel without finding out who or what was responsible for the dome.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Like, the mystery of the dome didn't matter. It was about the people inside, and their story and journey should have.
No, and the two men could have destroyed the town. Destroyed itself because it was forced to live just with itself, and secrets became open and things like that. And it could have ended with the town literally destroying itself, which it practically did anyway, thanks to the explosion at the end. And after that, the dome could have lifted and any survivors could have gotten out or rescuers come in and we never find out who. And I think that would have been much more, I don't know if satisfying is the right answer or the right word there, because you're not satisfied. You don't know who, but sometimes not knowing is much more enjoyable than knowing, I think, particularly when it's teenage aliens fucking around with townspeople for a bit of a laugh.
In that case, it almost would have been better to have an unsatisfying answer to that question than the answer you got.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
But then it's like Occam's razor and the fact that, well, what reality would we have lived in with like that kind of unsatisfying ending, not knowing that, well, the actual ending was aliens. We'd probably still be complaining about the ending that we got. But that, I think
most likely.
That seems,
it would have been less shit.
That's true. anything would have been less crap.
Eloise, how would you have ended World War II?
It frankly, in this story, I think it would have been far more interesting had the Reich won, like, a Man in the High Castle kind of
I was about
scenario.
to say.
But yeah, it's kind of hard for me to comment about how I would have ended it because I honestly just cannot remember all of the story threads anyway. If they were still going to go with solving the murder mystery, fine. I feel like it should have been a little bit more breadcrumbed than what it was. Maybe it was. Maybe I just didn't read into it well enough. Maybe I just didn't interpret it well enough. Maybe it's my fault for not understanding what was...
I would be looking forward to hearing what other fans of the series would say about your thoughts. As someone that has not read the series.
Well, and I know so many people who really enjoy it, so it's clearly just me.
Clearly.
Before we do sign off, though,
yep,
I would like to give an honourable mention to 48 Shades of Brown by Nick Earls.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Not to go into too much detail. No, Brayton, I know you had a extra part or something in the film.
Yep, I was in that movie.
Well, I didn't know that.
I was in the background several times.
But the story itself is meant to be the last year of this young boy's high school life. His parents are overseas, so he lives with his aunt for the year. And it's built up to be the absolute best year of his life, and he's going to have the greatest year ever. And we get to about the month of March or April, and the book ends.
What?
Yes. What? I feel like it's kind of like Nick Earls got a third or half of the way through the book and went, this is kind of shit, threw it in the bin, and his maid kind of sent it in for him instead. And we just get the first 3 or 4 months of the so-called greatest year of his life. So that's an honourable mention.
Was it supposed to be that book. A series of books?
I don't know. I was
gonna say I read that book in high school. I think year 11 for English class, and I think I remember thinking the same thing. Like, this is only a few months of his life, not the year.
No.
But the thing that annoyed me more about that book was the fact he didn't use quotation marks to indicate a person speaking.
That is his style, Nick Earls' style. He does that in all of his books, and it takes a lot of getting used to.
I did not like it at all. I never got used to it the whole book.
I remember it being part of the curriculum, but it wasn't one that my class studied, so I never got around to watching it. I never got around to reading it.
Horrible ending. Horrible ending.
Right.
Well, not even an ending, just let's stop here.
And to be fair, the movie is very meh too. It's okay.
Again, not seen it.
Yeah, just watch it for me.
Fair enough.
Oh.
All right, well, I think that's a good place to sign off for today.
Excellent.
Thank you for joining us.
Oh.
Thank you for having us.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And maybe we'll do this again.
We'll have to figure out a proper sign-off or something.
Yeah,
Go
we'll get there.
read some books.
You're not my boss.
Oh, okay.
You're not my real mom.
Fine, don't. I'll see if I care.
All right.